Good morning, people of God. I am back to talk about the church. My wife don't like me being frequently posting on here because of the connotations that it has with a space that we left. But I feel it necessary to always be about pushing forward the correct narrative about the things of God. And so I titled this video, "If your church is not focused on the gospel, it's not God's church." There's a lot of churches out there. We can call school a church. We can call any other gathering a church just based off of what the mechanics of a church is. A gathering of people, essentially. However, if we are not focused and are of one mind as far as what God cares about, it's not God's church. Just period, point blank. You know, this week, as I stated in my other videos, there have been references as far as the church is concerned. And I'm not going to mention any names because that would be, I guess, too forward, appearing to be contentious, or whatever the case may be. And I want y'all to understand that that is not my intention to be contentious. I understand that that is how it has come off. And, just quite frankly, there probably have been some times where I've definitely been directly contentious because of my own experience. That shouldn't be something that's conveyed to the audience. So my apologies for in the past if there's been contention that has been connected to what I had to say because of my experience. But the truth remains the same of everything that I have said. So I wrote a status. Basically, Chandler Moore had shared this status. One of my other friends had shared this status that basically came from Timothy Keller. Timothy Keller is an author that has changed my life with his book, The Prodigal God. It's the first exposure for me to gospel expositional preaching that caused me to understand that, the gospel is where it's at. Changed my life. After being in church all my life was changed by a simple book that brought out that gospel applications of the story of the prodigal son. And I found out that, I was pretty much the older son that stayed, that even though the younger son went out and did all that he did, essentially the older and the younger son had the same exact heart. It's just that the younger son basically stayed behind and was a goody two-shoes and did all the good things. But at the end of the day, when the younger son came back into the fold and the father accepted the younger son, his heart was revealed that he didn't care about the father in the first place. And so in short, that book revealed to me my own heart. And at that point, my life was truly changed by the gospel of Jesus Christ, because I actually saw for the first time in my life that I actually needed God. After being in church and being raised up for so long, I saw for the first time my eyes were open to my actual need of God. Because before that moment, I thought I was good. And I thought I was good because I was doing good things. I thought I was good because I had all the good spiritual disciplines. I thought I was good because I was going to church, because I came up on all the gospel greats music, because my parents were saved, because, I was going to a Christian school, because I was even reading the Bible, because I was even, up until that point, writing good statuses on Facebook. I look back all down my timeline. I've been writing statuses. I've been doing the things that I've been doing ever since I joined Facebook in 2004, 2005. So me making posts, me doing the things that I do is nothing new. I've always been doing it. But for the first time in my life, for reading a Timothy Keller book, I saw that I actually needed God. And I would have never said with my mouth that I needed God, but through that book and through the gospel, my eyes were open. This church boy that was raised up in church saw for the first time in his life that he needed God. And that brings me to this point of this status that I read, or that I wrote on my Facebook page. Because basically, let me continue the story. So specifically on Chandler Moore's sharing of Timothy Keller's comparison of religion to the gospel, one person in the comments was just like, basically help me to understand the last point about the gospel. Aren't spiritual disciplines necessary for a relationship with God? I don't get it. And so basically, Chandler Moore didn't respond because probably didn't see it because got so many things going on, so many people commenting on the status or whatever. But I took the liberty of answering the question. And basically, what I said is what I posted on my Facebook status. Spiritual discipline is necessary for a relationship with God, not salvation. We tend to lose sight of this truth as beings used to doing things on our own. And this is why discipline focused on gospel is necessary every time we assemble. The truth is, we come up in a world where we got to go to school, we got to get good grades. We come up in a world where it's results driven. We have to do good things to get good grades. We have to obey the law not to get a ticket, and so on and so on. We all live in a merit-based world where we get merit, we get results based off of what we do. And unfortunately, we tend to take this attitude into the church, which is a bad thing. Because the essence of the gospel message is that we don't have it together and that we come in through the blood of the Lamb. And the typical person will, on the surface, receive this truth. The typical person on the surface will even preach this truth and talk about this truth in church spaces. But the reality is that the typical person that claims to be a Christian or a believer of God doesn't really believe this. Because at the end of the day, our human nature is to be used to doing things on our own. Like I said at the beginning of this whole video, I grew up in church. But it wasn't until somebody actually shared the gospel in an effective way that I understood that me, a pretty much goody two-shoes kind of person on the surface that did things to be accepted, and that was a certain way to be accepted by society, a good person, quote unquote, that, by all measures is better than most, a good person saw that they needed God. I was the type of person that, I wouldn't have never answered the question, I believe I'm going to heaven because I'm a good person, because I know all the gospel lingo. But at the end of the day, it's not about what your mouth says, it's about what your heart says. Because we can say all day as Christians that, I'm going to heaven because of Jesus. You ask me on the street why I'm going to heaven, and I'm going to give you the answer that I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. It's easy for your mouth to say that you believe that you're going to heaven because you're a believer in Jesus. But what do your actions say? Or better yet, what does your heart say about the real reason you believe you're going to heaven or hell? Do you believe that you're going to heaven or hell because you have all the spiritual disciplines down pat? Do you believe you're going to heaven because you have a good prayer life? Do you believe you're going to heaven because you give enough and because you always tithe? Do you believe that you're blessed because you tithe? What do you believe about your life? What does your heart say? That is the thing that really is a telltale sign of what you actually trust in for salvation. And the reality of it is this. The reality of it is we are merit-based beings, and that 9 times out of 10, we are trusting in ourselves for salvation. And so that's why I have a problem with this talk about, come to church this, come to church that, come to church, hit this. It's okay to come to church, but we have to understand the reason for us gathering together. And for a lot of people, we claim that we understand why we come together, and we may have some semblance of an understanding of why we come together. But then we come together and just quite honestly, we talk about everything else that is not centered on the gospel. And anything that's far away from the gospel has a tendency to take our hearts away from God. You get up in the pulpit, people talk about finance. We get up in the pulpit, people talk about people talk about, what other than financial literacy do people talk about? Motivation, knowing who you are. All of these things are good. But at the end of the day, they fit an agenda that God is not really about. Any space where you're not talking about the gospel is a space to where you are going to tend to go away from him. And point blank, the fact of the matter of what I'm saying is the church has veered off from God in a great way because we have lost sight and value in the gospel of God. It's just the honest to God truth. And we can't do that as merit-based beings. You got to understand and know how we work. And how we work is we like to accomplish things. And that's all well and good. So what does God say? All right, you like to accomplish things? Let me give you one pursuit, the gospel. So if you want to have discipline about anything, don't have discipline about self-awareness, don't have discipline about finances, don't have discipline about spiritual warfare, don't have discipline about none of that. I want you to have discipline about me. God says, I want you to use your best discipline about me. Matthew 6:33, seek ye first the kingdom of God and all these things will be added unto you. And we love to quote that verse and we love to say that that's what we're doing. But at the end of the day, that is not what our message is on Sundays and on Wednesdays and on whatever are talking about. We are not focused on the gospel. We are not. We tend to focus on the creature comforts of this life. We tend to focus on life principles instead of the principle of life. And if we just focused on the principle of life, we would get a lot further. And maybe we won't get a lot further, but we'll be a lot better off because we won't be distracted from the very thing that we were created to engage in, which is Jesus Christ. So we need to use our best spiritual discipline towards the gospel because that's going to help to foster a greater relationship with God. That's what spiritual disciplines are for. They're not for this life. You know, if we focus on God, like I always tell my son, if you just listen to what I have to say, your life would be a lot easier. If you just gave me a chance, if you just listen to what I have to say, if you just understood what I have to say and the wisdom that I have to give you, your life would be a lot better. But you gotta listen. I can't make you listen, and nobody can make anybody listen to the gospel. All we can do is be talking heads about what actually matters and pray that God will open the eyes and ears of people's understanding so they will actually give God a chance and try Jesus. Because that's where it's at. At the end of the day, that's where it's at. And if you don't try Jesus, we're going to continue to congregate in circles. We're going to continue to come to churches. We're going to continue to come to church. We're going to continue to defend our pastors who may be preaching good words, but just not God words. We need to preach God's words. And out of preaching God's word and out of actually truly focusing on the things of God, our life will be better. Not because it's a rich, quick scheme. Not because it's going to make us rich at all. Not because of anything. But I tell you what, if we focus on God, we'll understand that we aren't supposed to take advantage of mercy. If we focus on God and if we focus on his gospel, we'll understand the grace of God, which would empower us to live in such a way that we will have riches. We will understand the grace of God that empowers us in such a way to where we don't live mediocre lives. Nobody that truly understands grace is going to want to be poor, but they're not going to want to be poor from a right place of being right with God and a right place of having a heart that's not idolatrous. They're seeking God, and because they're seeking God and because they're seeking the things of God, they have everything they need because they're moving with the grace of God that they got from understanding who God is through the gospel. So there's more to, so people misunderstand the prosperity gospel, and now people are coming at the prosperity gospel and say, I'm not a prosperity preacher because, you need money to, God ain't into poor people or you can't preach the gospel broke. All that is well and good. All that is well and good. But that's not what the prosperity gospel is. The prosperity gospel is not necessarily preaching money. The prosperity gospel is if you focus on money more than the things of God. It's cool. You need money to preach the gospel. That's all well and great. But you can still need money to preach the gospel, and your focus can still be overly top heavy on money. And you can say with your mouth, I need money to finance the gospel. We need to take this gospel across the country and around the earth. That's all well and great. But it's not about the money, it's the process to get there. And we don't get money by focusing on money. If we just taught people to move in the grace of God, if we just taught people the difference between mercy and grace, if we just taught people that grace causes you to act a certain way, we won't have to preach in the ways that we do concerning money in the church. Because people would have so much money, they would be like, yeah, I got so much money. Take this $200,000. Take this whatever amount. Because the grace of God has been so great in my life, because I understand who he is, that I got more money than month, not because I'm operating off of a tithing principle, but I got more money than month because I'm operating off the grace of God. I understand who he is, and so because I understand who he is and I understand his grace, and because his grace is so good in my life, I'm living my life in such a way that my earning potential has gone up, not because I tithed off of what I want to make, but because I'm actually genuinely making what I should, because I'm operating in the grace that I should, because of the God that I serve. That's it. We got to focus on the right things. And it's so sneaky. It's so sneaky. So many people are being deceived in church. And I don't say this with I know I'm smiling, but I don't say this with a malicious intent. But so many people are being deceived right up in church because they're being pulled away from the gospel every single Sunday, every single Wednesday, with every single post that popular pastors make. You're being pulled away from the thing that actually matters. And the worst thing is they'll demonize somebody like me for saying what I say, but I'm not saying anything wrong. I'm just saying understand why we do what we do. I'm just saying take a step back and understand what we do. I'm not saying not come to church, because that would be stupid. Because you can't be a believer in the gospel and you can't be a believer in the gospel and forsake the assembling of ourselves together. However, what is the assembling of ourselves together? I'm not coming to a country club. I'm not coming here to laugh at your jokes that said from the pulpit. I'm not coming here to just, rub shoulders with people because we claim to believe the same thing. I'm coming here to know y'all. I'm coming here so that we can know one another in the fellowship of his sufferings. I'm coming here to talk about Jesus, not nothing else. Not my life based on Jesus, not none of that. I'm coming here to be focused on Jesus and to pursue him for real. And the bottom line of what I'm saying is that is not going on in our churches. Period. It's not. And so my message to y'all is to open your eyes, y'all. Open your eyes. Because I promise you, just as sure as my name is Emerson Lee Tillman II, and I'm standing here outside of my job getting ready to go in from a break, we are not preaching the gospel and we are not focused on the gospel how we need to be in church. And that has to change. And that's why I do what I do. I'm praying for y'all, that the eyes of y'all understanding would be open. I pray Ephesians 1 over y'all, because we got to wake up. We got to wake up. We got stuff to do, and we can't do it divided. We got to do it unified with the same mind of Christ. So that's my prayer. I love y'all. God bless y'all. Share this if you believe the message. If not, just look at it and keep scrolling. But y'all have a good day.